I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. This is actually the second annual Juneteenth flag raising here in the city of Melrose. Crowd's getting a little bit bigger every year. We've got a lot of success to build on. Unfortunately, our welcoming remarks were going to come from a recent graduate of Melrose High, Jackson Cerise. Jackson literally just graduated from Melrose High School about 2 weeks ago, I would say. And Jackson is really a remarkable individual in that, can you hear me now? There we go. So I'm talking about Jackson Cerise, a Melrose High School student. And the reason why Jackson would have been an appropriate person to speak at this event is after George Floyd was murdered, Jackson, I think he was 16 at the time, wanted to organize an event, and it took a little bit of doing to plan out, but with the help of the community and quite frankly the Melrose Police, including Lieutenant Norton, who's here with us today, we were able to organize very quickly a demonstration, recognition that closed the Fells Way, and we had really all of Melrose show up. And that's really, to a certain degree, where this community became a little bit more engaged. Because obviously Juneteenth has been something that's been an important part of Black history and American history since the 1860s. And it is really, for the wider community, just getting on the radar to a wider audience, quite frankly, including white Americans, over the last couple of years. And as I said, Black history is American history, and that is a great thing that we recognize that and that we're moving forward. I am happy that we again have here with us today the membership of the North Shore Juneteenth Association. They've been doing work in the North Shore since the middle 2010s, important work throughout Massachusetts. And you can see the fruits of their labor because over the last several years, where this would have been a unique event several years ago, events like this are cropping up throughout the Commonwealth. And again, that is an important thing to celebrate and bear witness to. So I'm going to invite up our first speaker, Kashawn Little of the North Shore Juneteenth organization, to give us some remarks. Kashawn? I don't know if you want to hold that or kind of frame them like that.
Good morning, Melrose. Woo-hoo! This had to check the mic. I'm a member of the North Shore Juneteenth Association, and my name is Kashawn Little. I also work with the Department of Children and Families as a social worker. That is another day and another conversation on how foster care ties to Juneteenth. Anywho, on Facebook, you can follow the North Shore Juneteenth Association. I would like to shout out our political leaders who are here today. So for now, can y'all give them a hand clap, please? They will be speaking with us very shortly. Now, I would like to give a shout out to any members of the North Shore Juneteenth Association team that's here with me today. Can you please give them a hand clap? The president of the North Shore Juneteenth Association is Nicole McCain, who I also like to recognize. She has worked relentlessly to bring Juneteenth festivals to all towns, especially those of the north of Boston, and continues to do so. Just yesterday, the organization was given a $20,000 donation for the New England Revolution. Please give us a hand clap. Juneteenth has been celebrated annually on June 19th in various parts of the United States since 1867. The day was recognized as a federal holiday on June 17th, 2021, when President Joseph Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day into law. This holiday commemorates the 2 years delay enslaved Black men, women, children in Galveston, Texas experienced before being notified of their freedom. The same freedom that we talk about on July 4th, the same freedom that was compromised with the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that neither slave or nor involuntary servitude, except for the punishment of crime, wherefore the party shall be due convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to this jurisdiction. Slavery was reformed, not abolished. We celebrate Juneteenth in a recognition of June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas, and announced the General Order Number 3, which states, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves the absolute equity of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connections herefore exist between them becoming that between the employer and the hired labor. The free men are advised to remain quiet at their present home and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect a military post and that they will not support in either of those or elsewhere." While the order was critical to expanding freedom to enslaved people, the racist language used in the last sentence foreshadowed the fight for equal rights will continue. Before this order, slave owners in Mississippi, Louisiana, and other points of east have been migrating to Texas to escape the Union Army reach. In Harry's enactment of the original Middle Passage, more than 150,000 slaves were forced to make the treks west. After this order was given, it still took 2 full years before enslaved black Americans were able to celebrate Juneteenth. The first Juneteenth celebration happened in 1867. Former slave owners continued to enforce their power over free men and women, killing black families, oppressing black men, women, and children, and cruelly punishing them in every way imaginable. 250,000 black Americans that were enslaved in various parts of the country were being held in Galveston, Texas, which is why Juneteenth is celebrated all over the United States, not exclusively in Texas. Remember, slavery was reformed, not abolished. Black codes were used to restrict black people's rights to own property, conduct business, buy and lease land, and move freely through public space. The acknowledgement of Juneteenth as a federal holiday was a long-fought battle. The fight did not begin last year. The fight has received attention in the events of 2020, allowing change makers to grant black people one request. The National Juneteenth Observance Foundation has been pushing for this to happen for years. We are extremely excited to see the fruits of their labor and rejoice because dismissing the work of the people that did the work to make this happen would be shameful. Opal Lee is recognized as the grandmother of Juneteenth. Lee campaigned for decades to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. She promoted the idea of leading a 2.5 miles each year, representing the 2.5 years it took for the new Emancipation Proclamation to reach Texas. At the age of 89, she conducted a symbolic walk from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. She began the walk in September 2016 and arrived in Washington in January 2007. She hoped to plead the case for a federal holiday directly to President Barack Obama. Opal Lee promoted the petition for Juneteenth as a federal holiday. The petition received 1.6 million signatures. She said, and I quote, "It's going to be a national holiday. I have no doubt about it. My point is, let's make it a holiday in my lifetime." Ms. Opal stood alongside President Biden during a historic occasion and received the pen he used to sign off on the law making Juneteenth a national holiday. So please give Opal Lee a wonderful hand clap. Thank you, Grandma. While we rejoice during this ceremony, we understand there is still work to be done to end the systematic racism and to change the hearts and minds about black Americans represent. "And I'm a woman," a quote by Sojourner Truth. "And I'm a man" is the declaration of the civil rights movement, both historic statements that sums up the reason to continue the fight for equality. Banning the teachings of full history of America in schools, refusing to re-image policing, refusing to acknowledge the systems of oppression that plagues every area of our society, blocking blocking legislation on action that dishonor this holiday. Those actions led us to what else we know. Why we celebrate, we must continue to bring a bigger picture in focus. When I was in school, I was taught that blacks started as slaves. Abe Lincoln fed us, Rosa sat, King had a dream, and Obama won. That's not black history. That's not Juneteenth. Juneteenth represents hopes and resilience. Created by Ben Haff in 1997, who designed the Juneteenth flag, the bursting new stars on the horizon. The stars represent a new freedom and a new hope for the future. The red, white, and blue colors are used to show enslaved black Americans and their descendants as a part of America and American history. Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration of black American freedom. Upon being told of freedom, black men begins to build a life for themselves in America, to reunite, forcefully separate families, and make decisions for themselves, and doing so despite having nowhere to go or any financial foundation from which to start. Celebration of Juneteenth by acknowledge how far we have come, but continue to educate ourselves to the part of achieving more in an equitable world. North Shore Juneteenth Association is honored to share this holiday with you. Our organization was established in 2017 with the mission of spreading awareness about Juneteenth, educating the broader community about the positive aspect of Black American culture and dismantling racism by using events and programming tools for change. So again, happy Juneteenth, and thank you for being with us today.
Outstanding words, Kashawn. Thank you very much. Next up, everyone in this community knows her for her hard work and her commitment to fairness and opportunity for all. It's my friend Kate Lipper-Garabedian, the state representative from the 32nd Middlesex.
Well, it's a great morning, everyone. Happy Juneteenth. I'm so glad to be part of this community to celebrate with you for our second annual Juneteenth celebration. We were here together a year ago. It was a new state holiday. I had been proud to support the creation of that holiday as your state representative. And now we're, as we heard from our eloquent speaker just moments ago, we're here as our communities across the country to recognize a new national holiday and one that should have been on the books for a really long time. So it's a lovely day to do that with you. As Kashawn said, in a couple weeks' time, we're going to all gather again. We're going to be with our families, our friends. We'll be celebrating over cookouts, fireworks, parades, July 4th, the independence of America, the start of our new nation. And yet we know that the promises on which our country were founded were not fully realized for a long time, and we're still on a long arc toward more just and a more equal society. I spoke last year some about my own relationship with Juneteenth, and if you'll humor me, I'd like to revisit that a little bit, because it's really a history of deficit for me, and it's really a shame. So as you may remember, I was born in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy. I grew up not a mile from Monument Avenue, where at the turn of the century, people had seen fit to erect statues to slave owners and to Confederate soldiers who had fought to preserve a system of human enslavement. There was probably some grumbling about that at the time when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, but not a lot. What I remember was the consternation and the agitation that was raised when the city decided to erect a monument to Arthur Ashe, our homegrown hero, a tennis pro who had sort of integrated the sport and an incredible racial justice advocate. And you would have thought, the world was turning over by the idea that we would add a new statue to this row. And as I forecast last year, and I'm so proud to say today, his is the only statue still on Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. Over the last year and a half, all the other statues came down. And that's progress. Symbolism matters, holidays matter, our values are demonstrated in these moments. Meanwhile, as a student in the Richmond City Public Schools, I had more classmates who were Black than white. All of my school principals were Black, more of my teachers were Black, but I didn't ever celebrate, let alone acknowledge Juneteenth. It wasn't part of the conversation in my school. It wasn't part of the curriculum that was put out by the state. I'm certain that many of my classmates celebrated in their civic centers or their churches, but what a deficit for me not to be part of that conversation, not to holistically and inclusively enjoy that moment of American pride. Likewise, when I became a teacher in the Atlanta Public Schools, I taught in the 4th Ward. I was blocks away from Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. orated his sermons. It was a bastion of the civil rights movement. Almost every one of my students was black, but I didn't share in Juneteenth with them. That's a true deficit. It could have been a moment of engagement and community together to recognize the struggles and also the progress that we have made as a nation, but I wasn't part of that with them, and that was to the detriment of my relationship and our own relationships as a community. So, when I took the vote a couple years ago to create a new state holiday, it was equal parts excitement and embarrassment and a little bit of sadness that I had missed out on these opportunities. But of course, it will be different moving forward. There will be no public school teacher in the United States who isn't aware of Juneteenth and the fact that it exists as a moment of national pride. There will be no public school student who doesn't have an opportunity to see a flag or see a statement on a calendar and have an opportunity to engage in that conversation. We know that the work continues, that symbols alone aren't sufficient. We continue to see instances of systemic racism, assertions of white supremacy like the horrific massacre in Buffalo just last month. And we have to remain resolved that we continue to push forward in progress so that we have and live up to the democratic values of our nation that we were founded on: equality, engagement, civic responsibility, and liberty for all. At the legislative level in the session, I think you've seen evidence of that your policymakers care about ongoing progress in these areas. Both the House and the Senate have passed the Crown Bill this session. It would update our state laws to prohibit discrimination on the basis of natural hair and natural hairstyles. Critically important, and it's a real testament to my partner, Senator Lewis, and Malden State Representative Steve Altrino, who have been working on this issue for many sessions. We also just last week completed our work on a Voting Rights Act. We know that voting rights are racial justice issues. People in our country, if you are of color, are more likely to face longer lines and barriers to accessing the ballot box. Well, your state legislature is looking for opportunities to change that by expanding opportunities to vote by mail and early in-person voting. Last month, the House passed a bill to update our cannabis laws. At a time of criminalization of marijuana use, we know that people who are brown and black were more likely to be arrested, charged, and convicted under our criminal statutes. Well, the House has seen fit to update our laws to make sure that we're expediting the expungement of criminal records so that people have more agency in their lives moving forward. We've also made a commitment of resources to a social equity fund because we know that communities of color bore the brunt of criminalization, and yet they are not reaping the rewards of the economic industry and the potential there. So we want to see more entrepreneurs from communities of color get involved in the industry. And finally, by way of one other example, in the COVID-19 recovery law, the legislature appropriated another $50 million to small business recovery with a specific focus on those businesses that support our communities of color and those that were most impacted by COVID-19. This is progress. There is a lot of work left to do, but I am encouraged when I see you all here today. I am so proud to be part of a country that is trying to right some of our past wrongs and to look for opportunities to more holistically, comprehensively embrace the complexity of America. So happy Juneteenth. I look forward to seeing you here again next year.
Thank you, Kate. As you can see here in Massachusetts, the state legislature and our state leadership is at the forefront of making progress. Next up, the North Shore Juneteenth Association's Michelle Poetica Richardson is going to recite a poem for us here today.
Thank you for having this moment here today. Thank you for having us here today. Thank you for raising that flag here today. Thank you for sitting here and standing here today. Let me just tell you real quick that I need you to take a real close look at each other. Just look around you real quick. Look at the different shades of skin, different textures of hair, different facial features. You see yourselves? There's a whole machine out there trying to convince us that this is not what it should be. There's people getting paid rich salaries, honey, to convince us that this is wrong. That celebrating and giving voices to the voiceless is wrong. And I don't stand here as a voiceless black woman. I don't stand here as a voiceless Latina. I have no mic. I don't need one. My ancestors on my microphone. social pathetic imbalance. Wanting to keep a mellow tone but being forced by ignorance to get and stay loud. Surrounded by deliberately built to blind clouds that intend to do nothing more than just that. Block our sun, our essential vitamin D. D is for diligence, for deliverance, for deep, profound dignity. D is for defiance because I will not put myself in a box for you to neatly categorize me. D is for Dominican because I'm the poet, mother, sister, and daughter that is also who I be. Proud and untamed, privileged and unashamed. Nadie me mata mi orgullo. Oh, that's right. Back to English. But I tell you today that if my ancestors still walked and still talked, they would be ashamed of the cruel world we still live in. To see all of their sacrifices sacrificed to a world of sin. Futures looking grim, lives now trimmed from the exercise of dodging bullets of evil while trying to maintain a peaceful existence. Simple things taken for granted, many a seed poisoned by deception. There is no light to bring fruit to conception, much less birth. If your soul could be measured at this point, what would be its worth? For day after day we seem to take for granted all of the gifts and seeds by life planted, opportunities falling like autumn leaves in the wind. Close your eyes, extend your hand, pull out your shirts, create a basket with your skirts. Dream something, want something, do something. Don't continue to let life pass you by. For since birth we've seen seconds turn to minutes, minutes to hours, and those hours to days that fly by, waiting for you to embrace that epiphany. Drop blinding cloths and finally see you have it will happen to your last dying breath. The opportunity to be a fruit-bearing tree, willing and able to nurture all those in its proximity. But instead, we consciously choose to turn a deaf ear, turn our backs out of fear, knowingly choosing not to be, and unknowingly choosing to become Jesus' tear. What if you knew that your time was near, or that someone else's clock was winding down? Would you choose to be an adjective, a verb, or a stagnant noun? Smile or frown, be a prince or a pauper, and would you, could you, should you? Not just wear, but even be allowed to look upon a jewel-bearing crown with the intent to wear it. Tell me now how you see fit, that we've lost our belief in love, truth, and loyalty. Respect, honor, and affection given genuinely. How easy it is for them to stand and expect from me when they can't even look in the mirror and see what Jesus would see. The greater good, spiritual Robin Hood of the deep Robin capabilities, actually. That's what the art spoken word. They're random, I know. But as my thoughts wander to and fro, I ask you, each and every one of you, if you truly knew that the sky was your limit, how tall would you be willing to grow? Today is a day of change. Today is a day for you to understand once and for all that there are things that make us different. If I ask you what your favorite colors are, what the name of your parents are, where you come from, where you originate from, all your answers will be different. But if I ask you, each and every one of you here, how many of you have felt pain? Raise your hand, please. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the common denominator. Hurt people do not hurt people because you know what hurt feels like. You don't have to be black to know what it feels like to be oppressed. You don't have to be black to know what it feels like to be ignored, to be robbed of your voice, to be robbed of opportunity just because of what you look like. You put on a uniform every day that makes half this country hate you. I'm sorry for that. But we can't apologize for what we love. We can't apologize for who we are, for who we choose to love, for who we choose to become. Unless we become a person that spews hate. Hate is hate, is hate, is hate. Those two children both came from my womb. Look at the colors of their skin. That black and white argument doesn't fly with me. It doesn't work. Because if I stand here talking about white people are horrible, my son is going to feel a certain way. We have to change the narrative. We have to change the dynamic. Hatred is a taught and learned thing. Go back to the time in your life when you were babies before somebody told you who to love, who it was okay to have fun with, who it was okay to stand under a tree with on a beautiful sunny day. Today I ask you to go back to who you once were before the hate was programmed into your system. It's a possible thing, but it starts today. Make the choice today. We have community leaders that have given you a platform to make the choice today. There are community leaders in power that have not made that choice, that still want us divided. Make the choice when you go to vote. That is how we make the change. They've been in their seat for over 10 years and nothing has changed. Something's different. Something has to change. If you have not been through it, you cannot dictate policy for it. Y'all need a voice. And I tell you that with no tremble in my voice. Police officers need a voice because I have friends that wear the uniform. And we don't know everything that they go through. They're not allowed to speak. Everybody needs a voice. And until we make a conscious effort and choice to give it, we will always be at war. We will always be at arms. We will always be afraid to just be, to just exist. I don't care who you love. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what accent you speak with. I will love you regardless because that's who I am. That's who I am. I'm doing my part by raising my children to understand that everyone deserves love. Love begets love, and when it doesn't, it's not about you. It's not. May you all leave this space today loving yourselves a little bit more. May your wounds bleed less. May your scars heal over. May you understand that love is the only way we're going to get through this. It's the only way. Remember the common denominator. Remember what it feels like to hurt. Remember what it feels like to pick yourself up, to dig yourself out with no shovel time and time again. Just because of what you look like. Because of who you love. Because of how you were born, the parts you were born with. Or not. You understand? Hate is hate. Love is love. When we make the choice to love, we all win. Thank you, baby. Before you leave this line today, say hello to somebody you've never met before. Make a connection, please.
Thank you very much, Michelle. My instinct is to wrap it up right here, but we still have a little bit of a program to go through. Next up is a man who has served in the legislature for quite some time. His roots are in apartheid South Africa, and he has brought that sense of justice into all the work that he does on our behalf at the State House. Senator Jason Lewis.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for those very powerful, inspiring words. We see you, we hear you. Let's give Michelle another round of applause. I'm so honored to join you all for Melrose's Juneteenth celebration, second annual. Thank you so much to Mayor Brodeur and your team. Thank you so much to the Melrose Human Rights Commission. Thank you so much to the North Shore Juneteenth Association and to all of you for taking time out of your day this long weekend to be here to celebrate together. President Obama said, and I quote, "Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory or an acceptance of the way things are. It's a celebration of progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible. And there is still so much work to be done." Indeed, centuries of racial oppression and discrimination in this country have resulted in deep and persistent racial inequities across all facets of our society. From vast racial wealth gaps to housing and school segregation, health disparities, environmental injustices, and more. In Boston, the median net worth of a white family is almost $250,000. For a black family, it is just $8. And as shocking as that statistic is, the pandemic in the past 2 years has likely widened this racial wealth gap even more, as hard as that is to believe. And just to cite, and there are so many, tragically, statistics I could share along these lines, but just to share with you one more disturbing example of racial inequities in our communities, consider the fact that black infants die at a rate 2.5 times greater than white infants, and our black youth die from violence 26 times more frequently than do our white youth. To build a more just and more equitable society, we have to start by facing our nation's history truthfully. Our curriculum in our public schools and our private schools needs to be inclusive, and it needs to tell our history honestly. And we need to push back against any and all attempts to censor what our schools can teach or what our libraries can offer to their patrons. We have to acknowledge, honestly, the systems of white supremacy and systemic racism that are deeply embedded in our institutions. And yes, at the same time, we should also appreciate and celebrate the hard-fought progress led primarily by people of color that has been made over the years to advance civil rights and racial justice for all people, not just people of color, in our state and in our nation. Representative Lipper-Garabedian mentioned that advancing racial justice and civil rights has been a priority in our state, and I'm proud to be part of that work. And just to share with you a few other examples, the passage of the Student Opportunity Act in 2019, which is really about providing equitable funding to all of our public schools. Major criminal justice and policing reforms to address racial bias. We created a new Office of Health Equity to address the social determinants of health and racial and ethnic health disparities to work on closing those gaps in our communities. We also established a new legislative committee focused specifically on racial equity, civil rights, and inclusion, so that those policies would be a priority in everything that we're working on. We launched a process to replace our current state seal and flag, which, as you know, have offensive Native American imagery on them. And hopefully we will soon sign the Crown Act into law. None of this happened by accident. This took hard work and grassroots advocacy, led for the most part by people of color and white allies. And that's what we need to continue to do to make progress happen here in Melrose, in our state, and in our nation. None of this happens by accident. It takes activism, it takes people getting involved in the political process, raising your voices, and fighting for justice. And there is so much more work that still needs to be done. This work requires each of us to educate ourselves about our history and about the current state of our institutions, our society, and the outcomes that are unjust. It also requires each of us to be actively anti-racist. This work, indeed, is essential for America to truly realize its founding ideals. In closing, I just want to mention that I'm hosting one of my community conversations, and this one will be focused on what we need to do, concrete steps to advance racial justice here in our communities. And that will be taking place tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. on Facebook Live. We have a terrific panel of speakers, including Melrose's own City Councilor, Manjula Karamchetti. So I welcome you all to please tune in at 6 p.m. on Facebook Live to continue our celebration of Juneteenth and this important conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for inviting me to join you and say a few words. And happy Juneteenth, everybody.
So we are now going to raise the flag with the help of Kashawn while Janey Daney of the North Shore Juneteenth Association sings the Black National Anthem. And folks who may want to gather around, please feel free to come up to the flag.
I came all the way from Liberia. No, just kidding. Sorry about that. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with the steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our people sigh. Oh, we have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. But out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in our path, we pray. Oh, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee, shadow beneath Thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Jane. I know when Tug is compliment you, you've hit it. You've hit it out of the park.
Thank you so much.
So we're coming to the end of the ceremony. Again, want to thank our friends from the Juneteenth Association, Senator Lewis and Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, and especially you all, because it is our community that has to move this forward and to continue the progress. You know, I've talked a little bit about history. I just want to refer you all to an article from yesterday's Boston Globe in the ideas section. It says, "Who freed the enslaved?" And I will let you read it and think about it on your own. But the premise of the work is that Lincoln alone didn't free the slaves. That without Frederick Douglass, without abolitionists, without the black men who fought in the Civil War, things would have gone differently. I think it's important for folks to understand, as many of our speakers have mentioned, that if we are to make progress, we all have, as Rep. Lipper-Garabedian said, of civic responsibility to do the work. And with that, I have a proclamation that I want to read. It is the Juneteenth Proclamation. It says, whereas on June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, Union soldiers, led by Major General Gordon Granger, landed at Galveston, Texas, with news that the war between the states had ended and that enslaved people were now free. And whereas Major General Granger announced to the residents of Texas, the people are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection hereto existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. And whereas the first Juneteenth celebration was held in Texas in 1866, since then, Juneteenth has been celebrated in communities across the United States, providing an opportunity to mark the emancipation of enslaved peoples. And whereas on this day, in hundreds of communities across the country, people of all races, nationalities, and religions join hands to acknowledge the painful history and lasting systemic impact of slavery and racial injustice in the United States. Juneteenth is an opportunity to recommit ourselves to the goal of creating a more equal and just society, and that effort continues today. Therefore, I, Paul Brodeur, Mayor of Melrose, do declare and hereby proclaim June 19th, 2022 to be Juneteenth Independence Day, and urge all Melrosians to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Again, thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next year and at events to come. Thank you.